This is live. We'd like you to give us a call here at K-Star at 801-224-1414. This is Hans Anderson. I'm an accountant. I do tax work for a lot of people, and I've watched a lot of things go on in our government, where they spend the money, and I try to help people not spend quite so much. That's what I do for a living. That's some of my background. In past shows, we've discussed the Constitution. We discussed who wrote it. We discussed the situation our nation was in when those men got together to write it. And we discussed the nature of our nation. And we discussed the faith of those men who gave us our Constitution. I'd appreciate a call here if you want to participate in this history lesson I'm going to go through for a few minutes here. We've quoted several of the Founding Fathers, and one of my favorites that I've used again and again, I'd like to give from John Adams, second cousin of Samuel Adams, who was also a Founding Father. He observed, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people that is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." Now, if you believe that, if I believe that, you realize that our Constitution only works with moral people, moral, religious people. I believe that was true then. I believe it's true today. It's a barometer of how moral and religious we are. How closely do we adhere to our Constitution and the tradition of the Founding Fathers, in my opinion, is equated to how much socialism we believe in or how much we don't believe in. How far have we traveled away from what those men gave us? To me, that's losing our religion. Most people here in the United States believe in socialism. They vote for it regularly. The primary difference between probably a wild guess, 90% of us, is how much socialism we believe in. Not whether or not we believe in it, but how much of it. I would say probably 70-80% of the federal budget goes for socialism, which means I oppose about 80% of what they spend our money on, socialism. And it's my observation that the more socialism people live under, the more difficult it is for them to join the church. They don't need God. They have a new God. It's called their government. And 2 weeks ago, we talked about some statements by some of the LDS leaders, and I wanted to continue with those today. The idea being, who do you consider an authority? Who are you willing to listen to and say, that person is smarter than me? I don't believe it's me, but I believe there are good men out there that we ought to listen to, good men who establish good organizations, charitable organizations. Prophets have done that. Yesterday, I went to the Deseret Industries with a brother-in-law of mine. We spent 3.5 hours there. You know, I've been at Deseret Industries many times, but never have I gone in the back door. I was helping unload people's stuff when they brought it into the Deseret Industries. I was helping sort it, helping run a compactor for a few minutes where they were compressing clothes to take to Salt Lake. I worked on clothes they were sending to Haiti, large bins of it. You know, there are a lot of good people in this valley, a lot of good people. I was amazed to see the inner workings. And again, I was just there 3.5 hours, just a volunteer helping out. But there are so many good people around here. Man, that felt good. See that? There were employees there. There were a lot of other volunteers there. There were service people there, missionaries there. Just a lot of good people. Well, this makes me wonder, how is it that we have so many good people and yet so many of us still believe in socialism? And 2 weeks ago when we went over this, I pointed out that in 1932, 56% of Utah voters voted for FDR and his New Deal. And in 1936, his second election, 69% of Utahns voted for him. In 1940, when he ran for a third term, 62% voted for him. And by 1944, 60.9%, almost 61%. So we're pretty consistent in voting for socialism a long time ago. And how is it we have so many good people, and we do have them here? Why are they confused? Why do they go and vote for socialism? Another quote I went to, which indicates the seriousness of this problem, was David O. McKay. He was ordained an apostle April 9th, 1906. Then he was ordained a member of the First Presidency October 11th, 1934. And then he became our prophet here April 4th, 1951. He said October 18th, 1952, during the first half of the 20th century we have traveled far into the soul-destroying land of socialism. So again, how is it we have so many good people, and yet we vote for socialism, just like the rest of this country? I want to point out again, soul-destroying land of socialism. To President McKay, socialism was not just an economic philosophy of minor consequence to us. They're soul-destroying decisions, and we were embracing them. And I want to point out again, he lived through this period, and he watched our nation, and we Mormons support socialism. He had been an apostle or a member of the First Presidency for 44 of those 50 years. That's the first half of the 20th century he was referring to above. He was there, highest councils of the church for 44 years. So I think we ought to listen to him when he talks about we. Yes, he's talking to the nation, but he's talking to we LDS also, because we voted for it right along. Yet we're good people. 2 weeks ago, I also referred to an ungraded test my father gave his students in the BYU College of Business back in the 60s and 70s. And I want to read again his observation, because I've given you President McKay's observation in 1952, after he had been an apostle or the member of the First Presidency for 44 years. Let's go fast forward here. This is from a talk my father gave in 1979. I want to have you observe from this, had we improved ourselves from President McKay's day. Quoting my father's from a talk he gave, "As a college law teacher, I have made it a practice over the years to give a questionnaire to my students on the first day of class, in which they were asked to respond to a number of questions regarding their acceptance or rejection of the proposals contained in the 10 points of the Communist Manifesto. Of course, I did not inform them they were registering opinions about communism, and the questionnaire revealed that very few had ever read the Communist Manifesto. Their responses were therefore presumably not colored by any anti-communist bias. The results of the poll might be surprising to some. They revealed that on the average, my students were approximately 2/3 communist in their political beliefs. That is, on average, they accepted about 2/3 the communist program for socializing a capitalist nation." Well, again, that's from a talk my father gave in 79. I wanted to give that to you because we have President McKay in 52. We have my father giving tests to hundreds and hundreds of students between the beginning of the 1960s, the end of the 70s, observing that his students, BYU students, he taught mainly upper division. They were the accounting students. They were business students. You'd think this would be the bastion of free enterprise, and yet here they are. They believe in socialism. And again, how can so many good people be deceived? I then quoted from a letter from President McKay to the Board of Trustees, which he wrote. And let me just read part of this. "I cannot help but think there is a direct relationship between the present evil trends which I have above indicated and the very marked tendency of the people of our country to pass on to the state the responsibility for their moral and economic welfare. This trend to a welfare state in which people look to and worship government more than their God is certain to sap the individual ambitions and the moral fiber of our youth. I hope no one on the faculty of Brigham Young University will advocate positions which cannot be harmonized with the views of every prophet of the church, from the prophet Joseph Smith on down, concerning our belief that we should be strong and self-reliant individuals, not dependent upon the largesse or benefaction of government." And here's his kicker. "None of the doctrines of our church give any sanction to the concept of a socialistic state." So President McKay still hadn't changed his mind. And my purpose in reviewing this information is to emphasize the fact that President McKay believed socialism was against the Constitution, and he attributed our trend towards more personal evil as being a result of our turning toward socialism. Now, that's out of a letter from the Board of Trustees to the BYU faculty and staff administration. Now, I wanted to go back to the Constitution for a minute and give you another evidence that socialism was not part of the Constitution. One of the evidences of this we can go to is the federal expenditures in the federal budget. If you go back to the statistical abstract, you can go up to BYU and get this, same thing I did, of the United States. Go back to 1900. They're old books. You're going to have to work to find them. They're there, though. I made Xerox copies of them. But you learn, if you go back and look at this statistical abstract, that socialism was not a part of our government. You would think that if socialism was part of the intent of the Founding Fathers, and that was what they thought was a legitimate use of federal funds, you'd find $1 spent on it anyway. Well, you don't. There was a Department of the Interior that took care of the Indians. Suppose you could say, well, they sent them flour and meat and stuff like that, and that's kind of like socialism. But this is not what they were doing. They were wards of the state, so to speak, because we kept throwing them off their lands. But this was the Department of Interior. They took care of the pensions, government employees, federal lands, mining, and so forth. If you go back and look at that statistical abstract, go through the expenditures, you won't find a single dollar going in for Social Security, federal housing, federal education, Medicare, student loans, food stamps. It's not there. If you go back and look at the 1900 budget, you will find two departments which you could arguably say were outside the original intent of our Founding Fathers. There was a Department of Agriculture, and there was a Department of Labor. That year, the Department of Labor cost $173,000. The Department of Agriculture cost $3,625,851. So combined, those two departments, which you could say were outside the original intent of the Founding Fathers, they were less than 1% of the federal budget. Less than 1%. So how did we get to where we are today? Well, if you go back and look at these statistical abstracts from 1930 to 1940, you'll see the federal budget went from 11% to 60% of the federal budget going into socialism. And I believe this is evidence that the Constitution, in the tradition of the Founding Fathers, had no place for socialism. And let me read this again from President McKay. During the first half of the 20th century, we have traveled far into the soul-destroying land of socialism. Again, who do you consider an authority on political philosophy? Give us a call here if you want to participate, 801-224-1414. Do you believe socialism is soul-destroying? And if you do, why do we vote for it? I mean, there are great people in this valley, great people, and yet the vast majority of us, historically, vote for socialism. You know, there are a lot of people down there at Desert Industries yesterday morning. I looked around the place, I looked at the books and so forth. There's a lot of good people down there every day. And nobody drags me down there. Nobody dragged anybody else down there either. They're there because they want to help. Socialists would have had the police hauling me down there, or the threat of a policeman hauling me down there to make sure I was performing my charitable duty that day. Let me go back and give you a few quotes. How far back has our prophets from the past, how far back can we go and say these people rejected socialism? And if you happen to think that these men are men of authority we ought to listen to, this should be valuable to you. Wednesday the 13th. This is from Joseph Smith's History of the Church, Volume 6, page 33. I attended a lecture at the Grove by Mr. Finch, John Finch, a socialist from England, and said a few words in reply. Thursday the 14th. I attended a second lecture on socialism. I said I did not believe the doctrine. All right, there's Joseph Smith. These first few I'm referring to, we went over a couple of weeks ago, but it doesn't hurt to review some of this stuff. I forget, others forget. Okay, let's go on. Here's Brigham Young, Journal of Discourses, Volume 14. We heard Brother Taylor's exposition of what is called socialism this morning. What can they do? Live on each other and beg. It is a poor, unwise, and very imbecile people who cannot take care of themselves. So, back in those days, if you believe in socialism, you were an imbecile. Many of you, here's another one from Brigham Young, Journal of Discourses, again, Volume 18. Many of you have heard what certain journalists have had to say about Brigham Young being opposed to free schools. I am opposed to free education as much as I am opposed to taking property from one man and giving it to another who does not know how to take care of it. In aiding and blessing the poor, I do not believe in allowing my charities to go through the hands of a set of robbers who pocket 9/10 for themselves, give 1/10 to the poor. So here he is blasting public education. Why is he blasting public education? Well, it shouldn't be there, but it also happens to be the 10th point of the Communist Manifesto, promoted by Marx. All right, let me give you one by John Taylor, Next Prophet. Fourierism, communism, and I'm not sure I'm saying that right, that's French, another branch of the same thing, and many other principles of the same kind have been introduced to try and cement the human family together. So he gives them credit for being charitable. But all these things have failed, and they will fail because however philanthropic, humanitarian, benevolent, or cosmopolitan our ideas, it is impossible to produce a true and correct union without the Spirit of the living God. So, Fourierism, that was another term for socialism back in those days, he's saying it's going to fail because you've left God out of it again. Here's another one, John Taylor. I was speaking a while ago about the people that are being divided into three classes. One of them you may call infidel, under the head of socialism, Fourierism, and other isms. Communism is a specimen of the same thing. Again, John Taylor. So we've got Brigham Young here calling them imbeciles, if we believe in it, and John Taylor calling us infidels. Do you believe socialism is no longer the political philosophy of infidels and imbeciles just because more people believe in it, or we don't get it hammered in conference on a regular basis anymore? Maybe the reason we don't hear about these things anymore is that too many of us are political imbeciles and infidels. Okay, let's continue the evidence. If you want to participate again, give us a call here, 801-224-1414. This is a call-in show. I'm live and right here. Give us a call. Here's Lorenzo Snow. We cannot be forced into living a celestial law. We must do this ourselves of our own free will, and whatever we do in regard to the principles of the United Order, we must do it because we desire to do it. The United Order is not French communism, which again, we're going way back before the communists took over and showed what happened when they got the reins. That's Lorenzo Snow. His observation, you can't force people to live the celestial order. And that's not the United Order. I'm going to say more about that later. Okay, here's another, Joseph F. Smith. We want you to be one both in temporal, political, and religious things. In fact, in everything you put your hand to in righteousness. We want you to be one. One is God, and Christ are one, seeing eye to eye. Do not try to crush anybody or build yourselves up at the expense of your neighbor. So he's talking about equality, but not using force to get there. Here's George Albert Smith. And I'm going into some of this stuff because I want to point out this problem of socialism and people not understanding it is not unique to 2010. These prophets, clear back then, the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s, 1890s, 1900, they had the same problem. And they tried to explain to the Mormons, and that's who they're talking to. This is what we're dealing with here, still before the radio was running. They're trying to explain to we Mormons, yeah, you participate in welfare projects to help people, but you don't use force. Okay, here's George Albert Smith. And again, pretend you're sitting in conference and you're listening to this. And ask yourself, why would George Albert Smith be talking like this? Among the Latter-day Saints, they speak of their philosophy and their plans under it as an ushering in of the United Order. Communism and all other similar isms bear no relationship whatever to the United Order. I'll read that again. George Albert Smith. Communism and all other similar isms bear no relationship whatever to the United Order. Latter-day Saints cannot be true to their faith and lend aid, encouragement, or sympathy to any of these false philosophies. They will prove snares to your feet. That's Heber J. Grant. Man, should I keep going on these? Let me go on to David O. McKay. This is good stuff. And again, I'm putting it out there because I want you to hear what these people I hope you consider authorities on political philosophy have said about socialism. And realize this is not new to our day. A lot of good people still believe in the wrong stuff. A lot of good people believe in the wrong stuff then. They still work for a lot of good things. They do. I see them. I know they're good. But so many of us have been deceived. Okay, David O. McKay. Recently, a feature writer for one of the Western newspapers of the United States called at my office and during a brief visit inquired about the greatest threat to the church today. I immediately replied, communism, with its godless ideology, its complete subjugation of the individual to the state, and its complete materialism. The entire concept and philosophy of communism is diametrically opposed to everything for which the church stands: belief in deity, in the dignity and eternal nature of man, the application of the gospel to the hopes for peace of the world. David O. McKay. I read some earlier quotes from President McKay, so I won't go back to those. Let me keep going here, though. Joseph Fielding Smith. The modern trend of the nations is toward dictatorships. It takes form in two great camps, but nevertheless the direction is the same, although it is being reached by different routes. On the one side, the direction to make an end of all nations is through communism. And communism, socialism, progressivism, fascism, Marxism, they're all the same bucket, same political philosophy. Okay, here's Harold B. Lee. Now keep in mind, this is out of his teachings book, page 314, 315, if you want to check this one. Now keep in mind, with all the crowding in of the socialistic reform programs that are threatening the very foundation of the church. Now, who's he talking to? Is he talking to Russia and how bad socialism has gotten over there? Or is he talking to we here in the United States? Is he talking to we Mormons? Let me read that again. This is tough stuff. Keep in mind, with all the crowding in of the socialistic reform programs that are threatening the very foundation of the church, we must never forget that the Lord said that the church may stand independent above all other creatures beneath the celestial world. Whenever we allow ourselves to become entangled and have to be subsidized from government sources, and we think that it's the expedient way to do business in this day, or when we yield to such pressures, I warn you that government subsidies are not the Lord's way. And if we begin to accept, we are on our way to becoming subsidized politically as well as financially. Now, why is he concerned about this? Well, I read that the first line. They are threatening the very foundation of the church. So again, socialism, it's evil. Harold B. Lee taught us this. Let me again ask, were these prophets wrong? Or is socialism now just fine? Has the soul-destroying nature of socialism switched to benevolence and a harmless charity? No, it hasn't. Let me continue here. Here's President Kimball. This is Deseret News, 1976. This is a newspaper reporter who was traveling with him. Spencer W. Kimball, president and spiritual leader of the world's Mormons, said Friday his church is against state welfare systems. And then he quotes him. This is from Amsterdam when President Kimball was over there, and he's quoting him when he was speaking over there. We don't believe in government welfare systems, he declared. We teach our people to be thrifty so that if they get into financial trouble, they can look to their family, then to the church, but never to the government. President Kimball, 81, was speaking at a news conference in the Dutch capital where Mormon leaders are holding a two-day gathering during a series of area general conferences. Here's another one from President Kimball. And you know, one of these days, I'm hoping someone who disagrees with what we're discussing here, that they'll go back and they'll put together 16 quotes proving that these prophets believe in socialism. Wouldn't that be great? Then we could have a real discussion. Well, when they come up with the 0, and I've still got my 16, it might be a short discussion. But I want you to know that what these men believe. They should be our authorities for people in this neighborhood. Here's from a letter this is President Kimball's teachings, from a letter he wrote to someone. Assume you become the world leader of socialism, and in it have marked success, but through your devotion to it you fail to live the gospel. Where are you then? Is anything worthwhile which will estrange you from your friends, your church membership, your family, your eternal promises, your faith? So what happens if you become a good socialist? I think we could find some Mormons in Congress right now who should have read that letter. Okay, let's go on to President Benson. And again, if you want to participate here, give us a call. 801-224-1414. 801-224-1414. Maybe you've looked up some of these statements. Maybe you've read some of this material. If you want to share it with us, please do. Here's President Benson out of his book, Title of Liberty. No true Latter-day Saint and no true American can be a socialist or a communist or support programs leading in that direction. Here's another one from his book, This Nation Shall Endure. We must keep the people informed. And that's what I'm trying to do right now. I've been at President Benson's home, and I talked with him about this stuff. He was one of my dad's best friends, so I feel like I'm carrying the sword here for him, so to speak. I'm trying to do what he says right here. We must keep the people informed that collectivism, another word for socialism, is a part of the communist strategy. Communism is essentially socialism. We discussed this in his home. Here's another one from President Benson, The Ensign, September 87. It cannot claim the power, talking about the government, to redistribute money or property, nor to force reluctant citizens to perform acts of charity against their will. And that's where I think we get confused. We believe in being charitable, and then we lose our way when we decide, well, how are we going to get people to be charitable? Howard W. Hunter. This is from a talk he gave at BYU, 1966. Let's see, this is a bit longer. Let me see if I can cut this down some. What is the real cause of this trend towards the welfare state, towards more socialism? In the last analysis, in my judgment, it is personal unrighteousness. Well, that's Howard W. Hunter speaking to BYU students, trying to warn them. Personal unrighteousness. That's why we're voting for more socialism. He takes two concepts or two problems, has them hold hands, and then he says personal unrighteousness. That's the one hand. The other one, welfare state socialism. Hand in hand. Again, as I was saying in the beginning, how much socialism we have is a barometer in the eyes of President Hunter of our personal unrighteousness. Well, what is this socialism? It's Medicare, Social Security, and I participate in both of these. I've talked about in past shows. 55 million Americans participate in it. It's public education, it's food stamps, it's government housing, federal subsidized mortgages, government loans, welfare, whether to an individual or to a business. Businesses, they love to live out of the trough too, or get what they can. Whenever government takes money from one citizen by force and gives it to someone else who has not worked for it, that is socialism. Our prophets have rejected it. Let me continue here with a quote from President Hinckley. This is a little longer. I love that man. I've never been in his home, but I talked to him a number of times. On the desk in my home, I have a small metal box. It is about 12 inches square and half as high. On its face are 6 knobs and 2 dials. Now and again, when I have an hour, it becomes my plaything. It is a shortwave radio. Turning the knobs, I listen to London, Washington, Tokyo, Peking, Moscow, Havana, and other great capitals of the world. The voices I hear are persuasive, seductive, fascinating. Again, this is President Hinckley, and confusing. Speaking across the earth, they are part of a mighty battle that is being waged for the minds of men. They are aimed at persuasion in political philosophy. Do you think this man was aware of stuff going on? Yes, he was. There are voices of democracy competing with the voices of communism, and each is winning converts according to the discernment and the judgment of the listeners. The stakes are high, the weapons are sophisticated, and the methods are clever. Religion and the free exercise thereof, the right to worship God according to one's own conscience, how precious and treasured a boon it is, how necessary that it be safeguarded. Established religion becomes the guardian of the conscience of the people. That sounds like John Adams, sounds like Samuel Adams, sounds like David O. McKay, sounds like George Washington. Again, established religion becomes the guardian of the conscience of the people, the teacher of moral values, the defender of belief in the Almighty, the bridge between God and man. No people will live for long in freedom without it. The history of communism, whose founding fathers declared religion to be the opiate of the people, speaks with harshness and suffering concerning this basic matter. All right, let me give you President Monson here. This is out of his book, Faith Rewarded, page 7. I wish it were possible to fully describe conditions in East Germany at the time when I visited there. The Communist Party's hammer and sickle flag was displayed in each window of the ancient and war-ravaged hotel where I stayed. Church meetings were watched and monitored by the secret police. East German citizens were not allowed to leave their country without special permission from the government, and such permission was seldom granted. The feeling in East Germany was one of overwhelming oppression, with evidence of communist rule all around. Some people think that's past, hasn't it? You know, I'm working on a book right now. A good friend of mine, one of my best friends, he was 14 years in a communist prison camp. He got out in 1989. I wanted to put his story in this book. You want to know why I can't do it? Because he still has family in that communist country. He's fearful for their lives. He's afraid of them. You think communism's dead? Do you think these people that have family there think all is well? You can trust them now? I wish you could talk to a bunch of these people I talk with. Still don't want anybody to know what they've been through, what they've done, what they had to do to escape not that many years ago. Here's another for President Monson. At this central location, this is from Be Your Best Self. At this central location and at numerous other sites throughout the world, fruits and vegetables are canned and commodities are processed, labeled, stored, and distributed to those persons who are in need. It's like these people I worked with yesterday at the Desert Industries. There is no sign of government dole nor the exchange of currency here, since only the signed order from an ordained bishop is honored. Journalists marvel at this unique welfare plan and write glowingly of a people who take justifiable pride in the independence of caring for their own. President Monson, 177, Be Your Best Self. Again, a police wagon did not show up, being sent there by President Monson to get me to go down to DI yesterday. He's not that kind of a man, any more than Brigham Young was, or Joseph Smith, or Lorenzo Snow, the rest of them. Well, I'm going to repeat myself here. I believe the reason our prophets have consistently attacked socialism, communism, a welfare state beliefs, is because it was wrong. It was wrong when President Joseph Smith looked at it. It's still wrong today. I also believe the reason every prophet has addressed it is because we still need to hear it. Not only is socialism wrong, it's a philosophy most Mormons still believe in it. And I believe there are two reasons Mormons believe in socialism. First, the world believes in socialism. It's the popular thing to do. You can't hardly find a candidate who isn't in favor of it. So you're kind of like, maybe you heard the story about the friend driving by his drunk friend one night, standing out on the street, and he's standing under this street light, looking around, trying to find something, and he stopped and said, "Hey, what's the problem? What are you doing?" The guy said, "I lost my silver dollar." And so his friend got out and said, "Well, I'll help you find it." So they walked around for a few minutes, and finally his friend says to his drunk buddy, he says, "Well, now, do you remember just exactly where you were standing when you lost it?" He said, "Oh, yeah, it was up the street here about 150 yards. And his friend says, "Well, what are you looking here for then?" He says, "Well, the light's a lot better over here." Poor humor, but that's like trying to find a politician. You don't find good politicians are pretty much in outer darkness. Well, going on here, the more we believe in it, I believe that's the less our free prophets feel they can talk about it. To be a leader, you have to have followers, and like Moses in the desert, our prophet does the best he can also. Well, moving along here. I believe the second reason Mormons believe in socialism is that we are confused about the nature of charity. I mean, I was working with a bunch of people down there yesterday, good people, but I think they're confused, and they need to go back and read these quotes. We do not know the difference between inviting someone to serve his fellow man, as we were down there working together yesterday, and forcing him to serve his fellow man. We don't know the difference. I believe this same confusion in the pre-existence may be what separated us there. When do we have God's blessing to use force on one another? When do we have his blessing? When do we have his blessing according to our prophets, the authorities we ought to be listening to? Joseph Smith, he attempted to get the saints to live the law of consecration. Anybody who knows church history has read that. Anybody who listens to Donna Max's show knows that when she'd been going through the D&C. Let me read you a few scriptures indicating what Joseph Smith said would be best for we Mormons. What would be the very best things for us economically, which he then had to back away from because we couldn't do it. But let me give you a quote here. This is from the Doctrine and Covenants. That you may be equal in bonds of heavenly things, yea, and earthly things also, for the obtaining of heavenly things. For if ye are not equal in earthly things, ye cannot be equal in obtaining heavenly things. D&C 78, 5 and 6. So this was the goal. This was the explanation of the goal. Joseph Smith. That sounds to me like we're supposed to love each other, work for each other, help each other. And the observation here, if we're to be equal in obtaining heavenly things, we have to be equal in earthly things. So we love each other. We share with each other. We work together. Do you see anything in there about compulsion, setting up a government, setting up socialism? No, we already read what Joseph Smith said about socialism, so we can skip that. But it is not given that one man should possess that which is above another. Wherefore the world lieth in sin. That's D&C section 49. Well, Joseph Smith wasn't the first one to come up with this idea. We ought to be good to each other. We ought to be at Deseret Industries. We ought to be working together. We ought to be helping each other. If you read the New Testament, Joseph Smith and Peter had the same idea. Peter was the prophet after Christ was crucified. Here's what Peter did. And this is in the New Testament, Acts 4 and 32. And again, I hope you'd like to participate in this. 801-224-1414. If I'm getting off course here, steer me if you agree. Cheer me on here. But give us a call here, 801-224-1414. Let me give you Peter here from the New Testament. And the multitude of them that believed. That'd be like a bunch of Mormons getting together today, or a bunch of Christians. And the multitude of them that believed were of one heart and of one soul. Neither said any of them that aught of the things which he possessed was his own, but they had all things common. All right, again, is there one iota of evidence that Joseph Smith or Peter or any of our modern prophets believed in using government force to accomplish this equality that Peter said he believed in? There's not. We do believe murderers and liars and thieves should be subject to government force. Those people need to be punished by the force of government. I believe where Mormons lose their way is they equate prosecution of criminals with prosecution of people who are not charitable. Isn't that strange? Our prophets have it figured out. You don't do that. You do not use government to prosecute people who are not charitable. You do not make it a crime not to be a charitable person. Never once has this been promoted. There's not one iota of evidence our prophets approved of it, and yet we vote for it. Of course, it's the law, and I believe we have to obey the law, and I don't challenge that. We should obey the law, but that should not be the law, and we should not believe in that law. And to reiterate what I've said 3 or 4 times already, socialism, the philosophy of compulsory charity, according to President McKay, is soul-destroying. And as President Hunter said, the more socialism we believe in, That's a register of our personal unrighteousness. Like we've got our own barometer for our nation. And we of all people know that there's more to life. It's called the next life. And if socialism is soul-destroying, we who believe that it is soul-destroying, we've got to speak up. We've got to talk to our friends and neighbors. Yes, we have to obey the law, but we ought to condemn it. We ought to make popular that which is good and let people know, hey, this is bad stuff. And it's not just you. You can get a bunch of these authorities and show it to people. You remember when Christ talked with the rich young ruler and he urged him to help the poor? And then he let the rich man walk away when he didn't? Let me ask you, is there one iota of evidence Christ changed his mind and decided not to let the rich young ruler walk away? Is there evidence Christ ever used force to get people to be charitable? And again, all these socialist programs, they're the law, and we have to obey the law. But again, the law is wrong, and the law is soul-destroying. It's a sin. Well, next I wanted to talk more about this cause of what I believe is the cause of this confusion and this misidentification of many LDS with socialists and with the socialist philosophy. My whole life I've heard my fellow Mormons say the United Order or the Order of Enoch or the Law of Consecration. They're the same thing as socialism, communism, fascism, the New Deal, progressivism. I've heard this my whole life. I suppose you have too. That's one of the reasons I went through 16 prophets here, their statements that let us know they weren't confused about it. These men knew the difference. Going back a long ways, my great-grandpa, Israel Hoyt, he was the first president of the United Order. Have any of you ever been down to Orderville? I've been through there several times. My great-grandfather lived down there. Well, anyway, as a result of our family history, we have some traditions and beliefs regarding the United Order. Stories that have been handed down, the histories that we've read that these people left. And anyway, because of these traditions and beliefs, it really rouses us up when some saint says the United Order was socialism or some form of socialism. Well, it was not, and it was not figuring out how to do it right. Going back to the statements previously cited by the prophets from Joseph Smith on down, the prophets knew it. The men that were participating in the United Order, and again my great-grandfather was the first president of it, they did not believe it was socialism. Nothing has changed. Those who have listened to the prophets have learned the difference between socialism and the United Order. They don't have to have this explained to them again and again, even though the prophets, all 16, have repeated the same political philosophy. Giving you a little history here, back in 1873, there was a big financial panic here in the United States. It affected us out here in Utah. A lot of men were out of work. A lot of people couldn't find work. People couldn't sell things. So Brigham Young suggested that they try something, and he was down in St. George when he came up with this idea. He suggested that the Mormon settlements try what was called the United Order of Zion. Another term for it was the Order of Enoch. It was left up to the local bishops and the stake presidents to determine how far they wanted to take this idea. Well, Israel Hoyt, my great-grandfather, and others who were down in a place called Mount Carmel, it's still there, they wanted to try this all things in common. Well, they tried it. There was dissension among the Mormons. Some wanted to try this, the thing Brigham Young was proposing. Others didn't. And by the fall of 1874, a year and a half later, many of the saints wanted to participate. Many didn't. Well, it was decided that whoever wanted to actually try and live the United Order would move up the valley 2.5 miles, what was called the Long Valley. Well, it still is. So those of one mind could be in one place. Now, this small group of saints, settlers, was not just another group of Mormons. These were saints who wanted to go as far as they could in living this new United Order of Zion Brigham Young was promoting. Brigham Young wanted them to succeed. Do you know 100% of the Mormons who went up the canyon, up the valley to Orderville community, hoped it would succeed? 100% of them. There wasn't a single one of them got forced. Now, this is one of the reasons the United Order lasted longer in Orderville than any place else. These people went up there. They made new covenants to bear one another's burdens. They actually got baptized again into the order. We don't do things like that anymore. We realize that one baptism is enough, but this is one of the things they used to do to show the Lord we're going to be different. And now, members of the church were not labeled good Mormons because of the United Order, if they joined it, nor were they labeled bad Mormons if they didn't choose to join. This was a personal choice. It was not a membership requirement. It was just doing what the prophets suggested they do. But to get into it, applicants had to demonstrate a desire to work for the good of all and to follow their church leaders. Brigham Young, he sent down a list of what were called Articles of Agreement, outlining how the order was to operate. He also sent 14 Rules of Order individuals joining the order had to subscribe to. You know, reading through these questions, reading through these agreements that these my great-grandfather and others made back there in Orderville, it makes you think the covenant Alma asked his convert members to make at the Waters of Mormon. That's in Mosiah 18:8-11. The order was governed by the bishop, his counselors, and a board of directors. Those men worked together to divide up the members into departments, determining how best to match up talents and needs. Now, the purpose of going through Israel Hoyt's history, and this extremely brief history of the United Order, is to eliminate the misconception that my grandpa and the bishops who followed him and the Latter-day Saints there were socialists. I want to eliminate that misconcept. I hope you'll help me in educating my fellow Mormons. They were not socialists. 100% of the saints who joined the order came of their own free will. Not a one of them had the sheriff involved. They wanted to bear one another's burdens. They made a covenant. Not once did one of those Mormons, including my great-grandfather, ever propose forcing their fellow saints to have all things in common. Not once was there a law passed compelling people to participate. Not once was there the proposal that they would force their fellow man to be charitable. Personal choice, not coercion, determined who joined. To join the order, part of the covenant involved the rebaptism, which I've already mentioned. Well, how would a socialist have handled a difference of opinion? They had differences of opinion in Mount Carmel. How would a socialist have handled the problem? A socialist would bring the sheriff into the fray. The sheriff would tell the people there 51% or more have favored the order. And then they would tell the sheriff, it's your job to seize the property of those less charitable saints. Force them to turn their land over to the church, which is what the saints did who went up to the order. The church owned the land. It owned their homes. It owned everything. A socialist would say, you do not have a choice in this matter. Over half of us believe in it. We will now force you to participate in it. And this is part of the tragedy is our fellow saints don't understand the difference. The socialist could then say, we have 100% participation. Everyone here is charitable. Everyone here is charitable. Now, what's more important to you and me? Should we have all things in common? Yes, we should. Should we have it even if we must use force to get someone to participate? Or is changing the heart or changing actions going to help a person eternally? Which one's going to do it? If you force a man to be charitable, is he now charitable? What are we looking for here? A change of the heart? Do you believe that you have helped someone you forced to be charitable? Going back to what I said in the beginning, going back to the federal budget, 1900, you go through that. There's almost no socialism. There's a Department of Labor. There's a Department of Agriculture. Less than 1% of the federal budget went for these things. The big takeoff became 1930 to 1940. And I point that out as another evidence that our founding fathers did not believe in socialism. And I'll say it again, our church leaders do not believe in socialism. The United Order was not socialism. Socialism appeals to those who wish to live off the labor of others and to force laborers to continue to support them. It appeals to those who wish to exercise control or dominion or compulsion upon the souls of the children of men. To individuals who have no use for the agency of man, you can refer to that in Moses 4 and 3, socialism sounds like God's plan to care for one's brother. It is not. It is Satan's counterfeit. We read one of the prophets over here on that. They talk about it ushering in the United Order, but it's not. And Latter-day Saints should not believe it is. The socialist would be content to announce 100% of the saints in Orderville have given their all to the church, and 100% of the saints in Mount Carmel have given their all to the church. The socialist is not concerned about turning the hearts of the saints. The socialist is content to use violence, government force, or the threat of it to accomplish what appears to the untrained eye to be the same 100% participation in loving their fellow man. And this, I believe, is the primary reason we're confused. We're confused because we cannot identify the difference between what is the proper role of government and what is the improper role of government. Should government punish crime? Yes, it should punish crime. That's Scripture. However, lack of charity is not and should not be a criminal offense. It is not the proper role of government to criminalize lack of charity and then use government to compel acts of charity. Again, nobody showed up and dragged me down to DI. No one. D&C 121. How seriously is this decision, whether or not we're going to use force on our fellow man improperly? D&C 121:37, to exercise control or dominion or compulsion upon the souls of the children of men in any degree of unrighteousness. Behold, the heavens withdraw themselves, the Spirit of the Lord is grieved, and when it is withdrawn, amen, to the priesthood or the authority of that man. I read that because the point I'm trying to make here is that socialism, compulsory charity, compelling people to share, whether it's for food stamps, old age, public schools, medical bills, housing, food stamps, these are, in my opinion, all where we fall to this weakness we all have. We want to exercise control, dominion, or compulsion upon the souls of the children of men, and it's unrighteous to do that. And what does our Father in heaven say is going to be the result of that if we continue in that belief? Amen to the priesthood, to the authority of that man. Well, we're done. Again, I hope this has been informative to you. I've enjoyed sharing these messages with you. I hope you'll do some research and find out what these men have said. Share it with your fellow man. They need it. They need it. There are a lot of good people out there. I mean great people. You see them every day. They're everywhere. Share your thoughts with them, and we'll see you. Have I got a caller? Caller, you got about 30 seconds.
Okay, really quickly. I agree with this philosophy. I'm just wondering about some of the things that are happening are kind of merging this difference. Like now they're saying that homeschoolers can get money for some of their programs for, to take a science class. They can order the book and do a science class. And it seems like that might be okay because you're getting taxes back. Maybe in theory, maybe it's wrong. Give me a quick solution.
Well, anything, and this is common, anything that the government subsidizes, it also will control. Mm-hmm. And that's where the problem, I'd say that's a step going in the right direction, but it's still not the solution to the problem, which is obvious. It's out of the 10th point of the Communist Manifesto. The government still controls it. But I think that's a step in the right direction. That gives people more freedom than they have otherwise. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a plus.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for your comments. So enjoyed your show.
Hey, thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right. It's been good to share this time with you today. I hope you'll listen next week. next week, Friday, 10 to 11, where we'll carry on with this discussion of our Constitution. Have a good day, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. Thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA. There's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
1400 K-Star is KSRR Provo.
Imagine me and you, I do. I think about you day and night. It's only right to think about the girl